You're gonna move it, or we'll move it for you. That's what Meredith Vaughn hissed, standing in my driveway, arms folded like she ran the block. She didn't even look me in the eye, just passed me to the car behind me, the Rolls, my uncle's car, his pride and joy. She pointed like she'd spotted a violation of federal law. HOA Code 7C, vehicles of excessive value may invite crime or reduce neighborhood cohesion. You mean this vehicle? I stepped aside so she had a clearer view. That's not a parked car, Meredith, that's family. She opened her mouth, ready to rattle off more citations, but I beat her to it. Oh, and by the way, that easement you're standing on, I own it. Her smug expression cracked. My name's Elijah Brooks. I'm a real estate appraiser by trade, but around here, I'm the guy who'd inherited the one house Meredith Vaughn can't control and the one car she can't erase from the landscape. My uncle, Raymond Brooks, was the first black man to own property on Lake Cedar Ridge. He built this house by hand in '83, fought off 3 hostile buyouts, and paid off his mortgage in cash. That car, the 1987 Rolls-Royce Silver Spur. That was his statement. You don't need to be accepted to take up space. Now they want to tow it. Let me know where you're watching from, because trust me, what happened next, you'll want to see how far this goes. You want to understand why this matters to me? Why I didn't just roll the car into the garage and call it a day? Because that car was the last thing my uncle ever asked me to protect. The day I closed his eyes for the last time, the house was quiet save for the ticking of the old wall clock he'd refused to modernize. On his nightstand next to the oxygen tank was the handwritten map of this property, original, drawn in his own neat penmanship. He called it the Fortress. Every inch of it mattered to him, the big oak tree in the front yard, the cracked red brick path, the garage where he polished that car every Sunday afternoon. He circled the driveway on that map 3 times, wrote beneath it, "If they try to take this from you, don't just hold your ground. Own it." That's what the Rolls-Royce means. That's why I didn't move it. When Meredith showed up that first time, it was about community safety. Second time, it was visual harmony. By the 3rd citation, it was clear this wasn't about code violations. It was about control. Let me paint this place for you. Lake Cedar Ridge is one of those curated neighborhoods, the kind with matching mailbox heights, quarterly newsletters about hedges, and committees for committees. My neighbors aren't bad people, most just keep their heads down. But Meredith? She runs the HOA like it's a private militia. The problem is, the moment she saw the Rolls, she didn't see a car, she saw defiance. She'd left a bright orange sticker on the windshield one morning that read, "Final warning, non-compliant vehicles subject to tow." I peeled it off like it was a joke, but the letter that followed wasn't. A certified notice demanding I cease parking the luxury vehicle on visible property grounds within 7 days or face legal action and HOA-initiated removal. The kicker? I'd just paid my dues in full. Twice. They returned 1 check, said I didn't meet community standards. I didn't start this fight. I'd just moved in, still unpacking boxes, the smell of my uncle's cologne lingering in the hallway. I hadn't touched his study yet, couldn't bring myself to. Still had his cane resting by the fireplace, his reading glasses on the mantel, and that map pinned to the wall with a rusty tack. But the HOA wasn't going to give me time to grieve. Meredith wanted me to either bend, sell, or disappear. So I started reading. First the HOA bylaws, then property codes, then I called a lawyer buddy from my appraisal days. And I noticed something strange about their citations. They were quoting rules that didn't exist in the publicly filed CC&R. Something was off. And I knew this, I wasn't just being pushed, I was being targeted. So I did what my uncle would have done. I walked outside, popped the hood of the Rolls, and began detailing it right there in the driveway. Meredith called it provocation. I called it presence. And this was just the opening move. The next morning, I came out to find 3 new violations tucked under my front door like coupons I never asked for. One for decorative inconsistency because I hadn't yet repainted the mailbox to HOA-approved beige. One for unsecured trash receptacle, even though the bin hadn't moved an inch since garbage day. And the last one, my favorite, was for improper driveway usage. It didn't take a genius to see what this was. Meredith wasn't trying to enforce rules, she was trying to make me crack. I stood on the porch reading those papers in my bare feet, morning coffee still in hand. Somewhere behind me, Uncle Ray's wall clock ticked. Loud, steady, defiant. At that point, I could have played it safe. Rolled the car into the garage, painted the damn mailbox beige, smiled at the neighbors and tried to fit in. But when the game starts with fake rules, there's no winning by playing along. So I drove the Rolls down to the post office. Slow, smooth, all chrome and class, and mailed an appeal to the HOA board. Not through email, not through their app. I sent it certified, with tracking and included photos, time-stamped and highlighted sections from the HOA's own CC&Rs. If they wanted to drag me through their own mud, I was going to make sure they choked on it. 3 days later, I got a reply. A printed letter, not signed, stating my appeal was denied on the basis of non-compliance with evolving community standards. No explanation, no vote record, just a neat stamp at the bottom that read, Lake Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, board approved. That was the moment I knew I was in something bigger than a personal spat. This wasn't just Meredith being petty, this was a machine, and she was at the wheel. At the next board meeting, I showed up in person. They didn't expect me. The clubhouse smelled like old carpet and air freshener. Folding chairs in rows, half filled with residents more interested in the free cookies than policy. Meredith sat at the front, flanked by 2 familiar faces. Stephen Crail, the HOA treasurer, bald, smug, clicking a pen like he was waiting for a sales pitch, and Danielle Yu, board secretary, eyes locked to her tablet. I waited until the floor opened for resident concerns. When they called my name, I stepped forward with my binder in hand. 3 violations in 72 hours, I said, laying down copies of the notices. All vague, none matching the community charter, and 0 documentation for the so-called evolving standards. Meredith didn't flinch. She just blinked slowly and said, "We reserve the right to make adjustments that serve the aesthetic harmony of the ridge." I asked, where are those adjustments documented? Because I've read the charter 6 times now. No amendments, no votes. Stephen leaned forward. "Mr. Brooks, you're new here. The HOA functions best when residents trust the board's discretion." I almost laughed. Discretion doesn't override property law. It doesn't cancel out due process. The room went silent. Meredith's voice cut in, smooth and sharp. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in a different neighborhood, Mr. Brooks. Someplace where your lifestyle choices are better suited?" That one landed hard. Not just for me. People actually turned to look at her. A woman in the second row shifted in her seat. A man near the back furrowed his brow. I leaned in, calm as I could manage. "This house, I inherited it from a man who helped build this neighborhood. I'm not going anywhere." I left the meeting without another word, but I caught the smallest thing as I walked out. Danielle Yu looking up from her tablet, eyes following me, lips parted just slightly, like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Later that night, I updated my file, scanned everything, backed it up twice, because now it wasn't just about a car. It was about who they thought had a right to be here. 2 days after the board meeting, I was at the neighborhood BBQM, half for surveillance, half for the ribs. I wasn't in the mood for mingling, but I needed to see the people backing Meredith up, who nodded when she spoke, who stayed silent when things turned sideways. Those silences? They were more honest than any HOA newsletter. The smell of smoked brisket drifted from a grill near the tennis courts. Kids zigzagged past lawn chairs, chasing a frisbee. On the surface, it looked like any other summer gathering, but the eyes told a different story. Neighbors watching me from behind plastic cups and polite smiles. One woman nudged her husband and tilted her head in my direction. He didn't even try to hide it. Across the lawn, I spotted Danielle Yu, alone by the cooler, no clipboard, no tablet, just standing there, like she didn't quite belong at her own event. I made my way over slowly, not pushing it. "Didn't take you for a BBQ person," I said, grabbing a water bottle next to her. She didn't smile, just glanced up, then away. "I'm not," she murmured, "but I had to show up. Optics." Her voice wasn't the polished tone she used at the meeting. This was quieter, tired. "Lot of optics around here," I said. "Even our mailboxes have to match." That got the faintest curl of her lip, almost a smirk. She looked at the ground. "You made a good point," she said finally. about the charter, the amendments. I stayed quiet, let her keep going. She took a slow breath. They weren't officially filed. Meredith keeps saying they're adopted by precedent, which isn't a thing, but no one questions her. I looked at her, really looked, and realized her hand was trembling slightly around her soda can, tiny shake like a leaf in weak wind. "Well, don't you?" I asked. She blinked hard, like I'd just said something inappropriate. "Because she's got the board in her pocket," she said quietly. "Stephen owes her. She covered for his property tax issue last year. The rest, they're either scared or too busy keeping their heads down. You stand up to her, you get buried in notices until you fold." Her voice dropped lower. "I've seen it happen. A family 3 streets over, they tried to build a garden bed, nothing fancy. She cited them for soil disruption and got them fined until they moved out." I leaned against the cooler. "So this isn't the first time?" She shook her head. "It won't be the last, unless someone stops her." I didn't press her. The last thing she needed was pressure. But I needed her to know I was serious. "She's coming for me next," I said, "and I'm not folding. She might think she runs this place, but the law doesn't care about her power trip." Danielle's eyes flicked up to mine. "Be careful. Meredith doesn't care about rules. She just wants to win." Just then, Meredith's voice sliced through the air like a knife wrapped in pearls. "Danielle, there you are. I've been looking everywhere." Danielle froze. I turned just enough to see Meredith approaching with 2 glasses of lemonade and a smile that could cut through concrete. "Mr. Brooks," she said, sweet as vinegar. "Hope you're enjoying the barbecue. We do try to foster unity, you know." I gave her a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Feels very united." She looked at Danielle. "Can I borrow you for a moment?" Danielle nodded stiffly. As she walked away, she glanced back over her shoulder, just once. That glance said everything. That night, I wrote down what Danielle had told me. I logged it, saved it. 2 copies. The next morning, I found another notice on my door. Violation, excessive vehicle idling. I hadn't even turned the engine on. They thought I'd brake under pressure. What they didn't realize, I had just started paying attention. Stick around, because what I dig up next doesn't just put Meredith in a corner. It threatens to blow her entire operation wide open. Let me know where you're watching from. I promise the storm's just beginning. The 4th notice in 1 week came printed on bright red paper, bold font, underlined twice. It wasn't subtle, and neither was the message. Final compliance demand. Vehicle to be removed or relocated by Friday 5 p.m. Failure to comply will result in HOA-initiated action at owner's expense. I stood in the driveway, the paper flapping in my hand like a flag waving surrender. Only I wasn't surrendering. Meredith had made it clear this wasn't about aesthetics or code. She wanted the car gone because it stood for everything she couldn't erase. By Thursday afternoon, the tow truck came. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a miscommunication. This was an ambush. I was in the backyard when I heard the engine, a heavy diesel growl. When I rounded the corner, the sight stopped me cold. 2 men in vests, unhooking chains from the back of a flatbed. One already crouched beside the rolls, assessing the undercarriage. I didn't yell, didn't charge. I walked straight to the driver. "Whose order is this?" I asked. The guy barely looked up. "HOA directive. President Vaughn says this vehicle's in violation." "Did show you a court order?" He blinked. "Didn't need one. She signed the release." I held up my phone. "Well, you're going to want to check again because this car sits on private property, and unless you've got a judge's signature, you're about to commit felony trespass and attempted seizure of personal property." He hesitated. The second guy stepped back. I walked to the front of the rolls, rested my hand on the hood. "I suggest you call whoever sent you and let them know the police are on their way." I wasn't bluffing. I'd already hit dial. Officer Keene, local, level-headed, had known Uncle Ray for years, answered on the 2nd ring. By the time the squad car pulled up, Meredith had arrived too, walking down the sidewalk in pressed khakis and a smug little bounce in her step. "What's the issue here?" she asked, all innocence. "You ordered a tow without a court's permission," I said. "That's illegal." She smiled, but her voice carried sharp. "We followed procedure. The board approved it unanimously. You don't get to rewrite property law." Officer Keene stepped between us. "Let's all slow down here. Miss Vaughn, did you get a court order to remove this vehicle?" She folded her arms. "The HOA has rights, and the homeowner has rights that supersede yours on private land," he said, calm but firm. She didn't respond, just stared at me like I'd spat in her lemonade. The tow truck rolled off 5 minutes later, empty. That night, I walked out to the garage and opened the old file cabinet Uncle Ray kept against the far wall. Most of it was yellowing warranties, tools he never used, a few receipts. But I found something deeper, a locked wooden box with his initials carved into the lid. I didn't open it, not yet. Not because I couldn't, I had the key, but because I wasn't ready for what it might contain. Ray never locked anything unless it mattered, and whatever was inside, I had a gut feeling it was connected to her, to this. But I needed more. More than just hearsay and harassment notices, more than quiet warnings and shaky glances. I needed proof, something that could hold up under real scrutiny, the kind that would put a crack in her spotless image. Danielle's glance from the BBQ kept circling back in my head, the way her fingers shook, the half-word she almost said. She knew something, and whatever it wasn't just HOA gossip. I started building a list. Names, dates, citations, patterns. Stephen Crail, tax issue. Meredith Vaughn, unrecorded amendments. Danielle Yu, conflicted silence. 2 families forced out over garden beds and mailbox discrepancies. I pinned them all to a corkboard in the study, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't solved yet, but knew I would, and taped right at the center, bold and underlined. Who profits from compliance? Because power wasn't Meredith's end goal, not really. This was about control, and whatever she'd built here, she wasn't protecting a neighborhood, she was protecting herself. I waited until after midnight. Not because I was afraid of anyone seeing me, but because the silence helped me think, helped me listen. The air was thick with that kind of stillness only older homes get. Groaning floorboards, ticking clocks, the occasional wind sigh through an attic vent. I sat in Uncle Ray's old study, the only light coming from the green banker's lamp he swore made him look smarter on paperwork. The wooden box sat on the desk in front of me like a sealed vault. His initials RB carved carefully into the lid, now dusted with the years I'd avoided opening it. I slid the small brass key into the lock. It resisted at first, then clicked. Inside, folders, a handful, but not just random paperwork. HOA documents. I pulled the top folder out and opened it. Receipts, invoices, pay stubs, all addressed to Clearstone Development, LLC, the same company Meredith had mentioned during one of her pretentious little HOA speeches, the one that gifted funds for the community park. Except these papers showed something different. One line item stood out. Consulting fee, MS Vaughn, $400/month retainer. I leaned back, heart thudding once. She was getting paid, not just running the HOA, profiting off it. And worse, doing it through a shell company, supposedly donating to the community. The next folder was thicker meeting transcripts. Uncle Ray had typed them himself. Some had notes in the margins in his sharp handwriting. Most were dated 5 years back. That's when Meredith was first elected president. One page read, "Board vote blocked. Vaughn furious, threatened to bury us in procedural mud." I kept reading. More records, secret votes, manipulated citations, quiet payouts to board members, and a scanned image of a property map, an older version of Lake Cedar Ridge, lots marked future development, including the one my house now stood on. That's when the lights flickered. Not dramatically, just a stutter. I glanced up. The power didn't cut, just pulsed. Old wiring maybe, but my skin prickled. I grabbed everything from the box and moved it to the basement. It wasn't the most organized decision, but instinct told me, get it underground, get it away. The basement smelled like cedar and old concrete, still had Ray's war medals hung in a dusty frame on the far wall. I laid the folders out on the workbench and kept the door half closed behind me. That's when I noticed the outline, faint, behind the tool pegboard, a panel in the wall that didn't match the others. I pulled at it. Behind it, a metal lockbox duct taped to the studs. Ray hadn't just stored documents, he'd hidden something. I cut the tape, brought the box to the table, and opened it. Inside, a voice recorder wrapped in a worn cloth. Taped to it was a post-it note in Ray's unmistakable scrawl. "If they ever come for the house, start here." My hands didn't shake, but my breath caught. I hit play. The static crackled, then came Ray's voice, clear, tired, steady. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone, or close to it. And that means Meredith made her move. She's been buying up the board slowly, one deal here, one fine there. That park she bragged about, she used it to funnel HOA funds back into Clearstone where she holds a stake. Every citation they issue, that money loops back into her pocket through the contractor she handpicked, her cousin." I stopped the tape. My knees went weak, but I didn't sit. This wasn't just petty HOA nonsense. This was fraud. Real, provable, paper and audio level fraud. I gathered the box, the folders, the recorder, and locked them in the basement filing cabinet. Upstairs, I stood at the front window, looking out over the street. Same rows of perfect hedges, same neutral mailboxes. And yet, for the first time, I could feel it shifting, like the truth was finally starting to hum beneath the silence. And I wasn't just defending a car anymore. I was building a case. The next morning, I pulled the cover off the Rolls-Royce. Not for a drive, for a reminder. The chrome still gleamed in the sun like it had something to prove. And it did, because this car wasn't just metal and horsepower. It was Uncle Ray. It was road trips to nowhere, toolbox lessons in patience, and quiet talks in the garage after Mom died. That hood ornament? It watched over us like a sentry during the worst year of my life. And Meredith Vaughn wanted it gone because it made her small, because it told the truth without saying a word. I unlocked the glove box, not for registration, but because I remembered something. Ray used to keep an old laminated property map tucked in there. He called it his backdoor Bible, joked that one day it'd be worth more than the car. It was still there, folded in thirds, the corners curled and sun-faded. The map showed the original layout of Lake Cedar Ridge when the lots were first plotted, but one section was circled in pen, a path from our lot to the creek that ran behind the development. That creek wasn't just decorative. According to the notes scribbled in Ray's handwriting along the margin, that runoff line belonged to our property. Not HOA-managed land, ours. And at the end of that path, the easement. I stared at it, mouth dry. If I was reading this right, the HOA had been using a part of Ray's land for community access. A shortcut path behind the walking trail ran right over the corner of our lot, and had for years. They even built a fence and park bench on it. And they never asked permission. Ray never sold it, which meant they were trespassing. I scanned the document. It had a signature from a surveyor dated back before the HOA was even incorporated. This wasn't a guess. This was a boundary line. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the county parcel viewer, and confirmed it. The HOA had built amenities on our land, then had the gall to fine me for a car parked in my own driveway. The hypocrisy didn't even surprise me anymore. But now I had leverage. Not in theory, in recorded, mapped, notarized proof. That afternoon, I drove into town and made 3 certified copies. One went into a fireproof folder in the house. One went into my safe deposit box. The last I kept in my car. Because if Meredith pushed again, I was going to bury her in the very paperwork she swore by. On the way home, I passed Danielle. She was walking along the sidewalk, headphones in, arms folded like she wanted to disappear. I slowed and rolled down the window. "Danielle." She paused, hesitated, then leaned down. "What?" "I need 5 minutes. Not now, but soon. I found something." Her gaze dropped to the map on my passenger seat. She didn't ask what it was, just gave a tiny nod and said, "You're not the first person she tried to erase." That stuck with me long after she walked away. Back in the garage, I stood next to the rolls and looked at the map again. Ray had marked that easement for a reason. Not just to win an argument, but because he believed in truth over control, integrity over noise. He never went looking for fights, but when they showed up on his doorstep, he made damn sure they regretted it. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was a land grab, hidden behind monthly meetings and fake smiles. They thought I wouldn't look, thought I'd fold like everyone else. They forgot this house was more than walls, it was a promise. And I wasn't letting anyone take it. They trespassed on my land, tried to tow my car, and rewrote the rules to fit their ego. But they forgot one thing. This house doesn't just hold memories, it holds proof. Stick around. The trap's being set. And tell me, where are you watching from when the tables finally turn? Danielle showed up at my front door just after sunset. No text, no warning, just a light knock, 3 soft raps that said more than words. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, hoodie half-zipped, and eyes darting like she wasn't sure if this was bravery or betrayal. I stepped aside without saying anything. She hesitated, then walked in. We ended up in the garage, felt safer there, the Rolls parked like a silent witness between us. She leaned on the workbench, arms trembling slightly as she picked at the edge of her sleeve. She said you'd make trouble, Danielle muttered. Meredith? She gave a sharp nod. Said you were arrogant. Thought you could outmaneuver the board just because your uncle used to charm his way through every meeting. I pulled the folded map from the top drawer, laid it between us. Your president's been building trails and benches on private land. Not HOA land. Mine. Danielle didn't even flinch. I know, she said. That stopped me. I've known for a while. My dad was the one who surveyed this area, back before the HOA existed. He told me years ago, that easement line ain't theirs. If the HOA ever says otherwise, don't believe him. But he died before he could make noise. And you stayed quiet. Her voice cracked. Because Meredith threatened to evict my mom. Silence filled the room. It wasn't shame, it was survival. I could see it in her posture. She's sick, Danielle whispered. Early onset, we can't afford to move. And the board? They'd find a reason. They always do. I stepped closer, not pushing, just leveling. I'm not asking you to burn your life down, but I need one thing from you. She looked up. Proof that she lied about that land. Anything. Meeting notes, messages, even a conversation. Danielle reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small black USB stick. She placed it on the table. I recorded something a few weeks ago. Meredith didn't know I was in the Zoom lobby. She thought the call hadn't started yet. What's on it? She told another board member to keep the fake land surveyor on retainer and said if anyone questions the park benches, quote, we'll drown them in bylaws until they forget how to breathe. My jaw clenched. The tape was one thing, the map another, but this was the crack in her armor. Danielle, you just changed everything. She shook her head. No, you did. I just stopped being afraid for a second. We sat in the quiet for a few more moments before she said she had to go. As she stepped out, she turned once more. She'll come after you harder now. Good. Let her. The next day, I went to work. First, copied the audio file and transcripts. Stored them in 3 locations, sent one to my lawyer friend in Philly. He wasn't HOA specific, but he'd know someone who was. Second, scheduled a one-on-one consult with Melissa Chang, a municipal land use attorney. She had a reputation for loving fights just like this. I'd found her profile through a planning dispute forum Ray had bookmarked, because of course he did. Third, I sent a polite, sugar-coated email to Meredith. Hi, Meredith. I recently came across some parcel discrepancies and would love to discuss the property boundaries surrounding Lot 19. Given the HOA's recent enforcement actions, I feel it's appropriate to align our records. Please advise a time for us to speak before Friday. Best, Lucas Blackwell. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one in 7 minutes. Let's meet Thursday at 2 p.m., HOA boardroom. I trust you'll bring your questions and your compliance. Oh, I'd be bringing a lot more than questions. Thursday came dressed like any other day. Sun out, sprinklers ticking across HO-approved lawns, and not a single neighbor making eye contact. I parked the Rolls right outside the HOA building, not because I needed to, but because Meredith hated the sight of it. Let her see it through the blinds and wonder what I brought with me. The boardroom was predictably beige, soulless carpet, off-white walls, and a weak pot of coffee already sweating on the corner table. Meredith sat dead center behind a faux oak desk like a queen guarding a plastic throne. Mr. Blackwell, she said flatly, without looking up from her planner. I nodded once. Madam President? Her eyes finally flicked up. You said something about a parcel concern? I set a manila folder on the desk. That's the updated plat survey, certified by the county and time-stamped a year before this HOA even existed. She didn't touch it. Page 4 shows the creek easement, I continued. Technically, those benches and that split rail fence you built fall onto private property. Mine. Meredith gave a slow blink. That land has been accessible to residents for years. Accessible and owned are different things. Ray never signed over the easement, and I have his recorder confirming that. Her fingers stiffened. I also have a Zoom recording where you told Brian Mathers to keep the fake land surveyor on retainer. That was before you threatened to bury people in procedural mud. That got her attention. She stood, spine ramrod straight, like posture could fix her mess. You've been recording board meetings? I didn't. Danielle did. Her face twitched. Split second of panic just beneath the gloss. You brought this meeting under false pretenses, Mr. Blackwell. Nope, I brought it under legal pretenses. I wanted to see how you'd react. Meredith reached for the folder, finally, but her hand hovered before making contact. You won't win this, she whispered. I don't need to win, I just need the truth to surface. That shut her up. Outside, I sat in my car a moment, letting the AC hum. The trap was sprung, now it needed pressure. I texted Melissa Chang, the land use attorney. Meeting complete, she cracked. I'm ready for the next step. She replied in under a minute. Send me the documents and the recording, I'll draft the cease and desist, and prepare for injunctive relief if she tries to retaliate. That was the thing about people like Meredith. They pushed hard, but they weren't built to be pushed back. I got home, poured coffee, and started scanning everything into a clean file. Voice recording. Maps, parcel verification, HOA bylaw contradictions. I included a side-by-side of the board's published parcel, SV8, the actual certified lines, annotated with yellow highlights. I was halfway through uploading when I heard a knock at the back door. Not the front, the back. I opened it slowly. Danielle stood there, eyes wide. They know. Brian. Teresa, the whole board, Meredith's spiraling. She told them you're fabricating the documents, said she'll call a special meeting and have you removed from the neighborhood. She doesn't have that power. She thinks she does. I let her in, closed the door, and opened my laptop again. Let her schedule it. She's walking into her own hearing. I'm filing a complaint with the city zoning board tonight, and Melissa's already drafting the cease and desist. She violates it, she risks her license. Danielle sat at the table, hands wrapped around her own elbows. She's not going to go down quietly. She won't have a choice. For a long beat, it was just the sound of the coffee machine and the quiet tick of the antique wall clock Ray had hung years ago. You think the others will turn on her? She asked. They will when they see what I'm about to show them. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab the paper and paused. A freshly printed notice had been duct-taped to my mailbox. Notice of non-compliance. Subject: unauthorized structures plus violations of community visual harmony policy. Penalty: daily fine of $250.00 until resolution. Below that, in red ink, Rolls-Royce not compliant with HOA-approved vehicle aesthetic. Rear gate fence structure in violation requires immediate removal. Meredith had officially lost it. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The gloves were off. This was pure retaliation, personal, loud, and reckless. I didn't touch the paper, just let it hang there in the wind like a flag of her desperation. Inside, I fired off a single email to Melissa Chang. Retaliation started, fines posted, visual documentation incoming, let's light the match. She responded instantly. Perfect. That gives us retaliation grounds for injunctive relief. Keep everything, paper, timestamps, neighbor witnesses if you can. I'll file the motion before end of day. And just like that, her trap was now my evidence. By noon, I got another knock. Not Danielle this time. It was Trevor Barton, one of the HOA board members. Mid-50s, khaki shorts, polo shirt tucked a little too tight. Always carried himself like someone who thought he ran a Fortune 500 company, except he was in charge of speed bump placement. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. I need to talk to you, he said, already inside. I didn't offer coffee. What's on your mind, Trevor? He ran a hand over his shaved scalp. You've stirred up a hellstorm. I stirred it up? Or did Meredith finally fall into one she created? He didn't answer right away. She's calling emergency meetings every other day now, keeps changing the agenda so we can't vote, screams at anyone who mentions your name. I arched a brow, and yet here you are. He looked down, jaw flexing. You're not wrong. About the map. The easement. Danielle showed me. I compared it to our records. You're right. I kept my voice level. You gonna testify to that when this goes public? He glanced out the window like the lawn might bite him. She's got dirt on people. Not me, but the others. Stuff she shouldn't have. She uses it. There it was. The real reason people like Meredith stayed in power, not truth, not leadership, fear. You can't let her keep pulling strings, Trevor. At some point, someone has to cut them. He rubbed his eyes. I'll think about it. No, you won't. You're either in or you're protecting her. A long silence passed before he nodded once. She's holding an open HOA meeting Friday. Said she's bringing evidence of your misconduct, trying to turn the neighborhood against you. Let her. I'll be there, with the truth. As he left, Trevor stopped in the doorway. You know she's got something planned, right? She won't just talk. I met his eyes. Neither will I. That night, I stood in the garage again, the rolls behind me, the map pinned to the corkboard above the workbench. My laptop screen glowed with documents, emails, and a presentation file. I had everything laid out, chronologically, neatly, legally bulletproof. But the part that mattered most wasn't on a screen. It was the letter Ray had once taped to the inside of the glove box. Protect what matters, Lucas, not just the land, but the way people are supposed to treat each other on it. He wrote that the week after the HOA formed, before the fights, before the politics. I folded it back into its envelope and slid it into my pocket. Because come Friday, this wasn't just about boundary lines and bylaws. It was about dignity. And people like Meredith didn't get to rewrite that. She's calling a public meeting to put me on trial. But she doesn't know. I'm walking in with more than facts. I'm walking in with her undoing. Friday's coming, and this neighborhood's about to hear everything. Drop your city in the comments and stick around. It's almost showtime. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 6:00 p.m. sharp. By 5:45, the community room was already standing room only. Folding chairs squeaked beneath nervous shifting. People whispered in corners, some pretending not to notice me when I walked in. Others gave nods, some cautious, some curious, and a few downright relieved. Danielle sat near the back, hoodie up, eyes locked on the board table like it might explode. Trevor wasn't seated with the board. He was standing against the side wall, arms crossed like a man who just finished choosing a side. The lights flickered once as Meredith entered. She wore white. Not cream, not off-white. Stark, theatrical white. Hair tied back so tight it looked like her scalp might crack. Her lips curled into something between a smirk and a dare. Let's begin, she said without even glancing toward me. First item on the agenda, she continued, is a formal review of complaints submitted by and against one Lucas Blackwell, resident of Lot 19. She clicked a remote. Behind her, a screen flickered to life. My face appeared, blurry, black and white security footage from my driveway. This footage, she said, voice sweet like poison, was recorded by HOA surveillance systems 3 weeks ago. You'll see Mr. Blackwell making alterations to his fence line, a violation of Covenant 6B, modifications without board approval. Murmurs rippled. I stood. Would you like to include the audio? Meredith blinked. Because that footage was illegally recorded on property that doesn't belong to the HOA. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket, held it up. This contains a time-stamped certified land survey, one that shows the eastern fence line isn't on HOA land, never was. Trevor stepped forward. He's telling the truth. A crack broke across Meredith's composure. I've reviewed the map myself, Trevor continued. Cross-referenced it with the county archives. The HOA's been enforcing rules on property that doesn't belong to us. More murmurs. Less fear in them now. Louder. Meredith's voice rose. He's manipulating documentation. I cut her off. I also have a recording, taken during a Zoom call between Meredith and Brian Mathers. In it, she admits the land is outside HOA jurisdiction, and instructs another board member to fabricate surveys. I set my laptop on the table, connected it to the projector, and hit play. Her voice echoed through the room. Just keep the fake land guy on standby. We'll bury him in bylaws. He won't know which way's up. The silence afterward wasn't silence. It was pressure, building, palpable. A woman near the front stood. Is that true? Another man used our fees for this crap? Meredith's mouth opened, but no words came out. Danielle stood next, quietly. I was on that call. She didn't know I was listening, but she said it every word. The air broke, voices surged. What else has she lied about? Is my fine even real? We voted for her. I want my money back. Meredith raised her voice, desperate now. These are fabrications, coordinated by someone with a grudge. I stepped forward. This isn't about me, it's about power, and abuse, and a board president who crossed every boundary she could find just to silence someone who wouldn't roll over. Trevor turned to face her. You need to step down. She stared at him like she didn't understand the language. Effective immediately, he added. Another board member, Teresa, hesitated, then stood beside him. Seconded. A vote started, voices raised, hands shot up. Danielle looked at me. I just nodded once. The motion passed. Just like that, the Queen lost her crown. The vote was done. The motion passed. Meredith Prescott was no longer HOA president. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The next morning, I walked into City Hall with a black folio under my arm and Danielle by my side. She didn't say much, still processing what she'd done last night in that meeting. Her hands were steady now, though. No more trembling. Office of Zoning and Code Enforcement? The woman behind the front desk asked. I nodded. Lucas Blackwell, we have a complaint to file. It's extensive. Upstairs, we met with a city official named Carla Jennings. Sharp, calm, the type who didn't blink at piles of documents because she'd seen worse from condo tyrants and suburban warlords. Danielle handed over a binder. Start with tab 3. That's the falsified survey. And here, I added, sliding over a USB drive, are 2 audio recordings, one with explicit instructions from the former HOA president to misrepresent parcel data, and another suggesting she deliberately targeted a resident in retaliation. Carla listened, quietly, diligently, only pausing once to replay the clip of Meredith muttering, "Just bury him in procedural mud." That's pretty damning, she finally said, leaning back. We'll open a full review, and if everything checks out, there could be municipal charges, misuse of authority, fraud, possibly even civil penalties if we pass it up to the city attorney. I exhaled, not in triumph, in relief, because no matter how public that vote was, it didn't carry teeth. This was real, documented, legal, permanent. As we left, Danielle tugged my sleeve. You think she knows we're here? I didn't answer, just looked out the glass doors and spotted Meredith's silver Lexus parked half a block down. She was in the driver's seat, watching us. That afternoon, my mailbox had another envelope. No duct tape this time, just crisp white paper, official HOA letterhead, but no president listed anymore. Inside was a notice. HOA Emergency Audit Committee initiated. Your testimony has been requested. So has Meredith Prescott's. I texted Trevor. She's trying to claw back in. He replied, let her. We're reviewing every HOA action from the last 24 months. Financials, correspondence, committee minutes. If she pushed anything dirty through, we'll find it. That night I sat in the garage again, this time without the adrenaline, just the steady hum of the dehumidifier and the glow of the old corkboard. Ray's letter was still there. I hadn't moved it. I reread the first line. You never know what kind of man you are until someone threatens your ground. Ray didn't mean land. Not really. He meant the space you protect, the people you shield, the lines you don't let others cross. That had been Meredith's mistake all along, thinking this was about a car, or a fence, or a vote. It had never been about the Rolls. It had been about my right to exist without fear in my own home. Friday evening, I got another knock at the back door. Danielle again. But this time, she wasn't pale. She was grinning. I just got a call from the city. Meredith's being investigated for improper allocation of HOA funds. Apparently she paid a private investigator out of community money to follow you. I blinked. Follow me? She nodded. 6 weeks' worth of invoices. They traced it through an invoice labeled security consulting. Carla found it buried in the records. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just released. She was so scared, Danielle whispered. She broke her own rules. I walked to the workbench, pulled down the map one last time, and folded it carefully. Let's bring this to the committee meeting Monday, I said. They'll want to see how deep she went. The emergency committee meeting wasn't held in the usual room. They had to move it to the community gym. Too many people RSVP'd. By 5:45 p.m., the metal chairs were filled with neighbors, people I'd passed 100 times and never really seen. Now they nodded, held eye contact, even offered me their spot in line for water. On the dais sat 5 interim committee members. Meredith was nowhere in sight, but her name, her actions, her legacy hung over the room like fog. Trevor stood near the podium holding a folder thick enough to burst. Danielle sat beside me holding Ray's letter, her fingers trembling again, but this time from anticipation. The chairwoman, an older woman named Mrs. Langston, called the room to order. Today's hearing, she said, addresses multiple violations of HOA authority. We will review financial misappropriation, unlawful surveillance, fabricated parcel data, and retaliatory conduct carried out under former President Meredith Prescott. A low current ran through the crowd. No shouts, just sharp inhales and a sense that something real was about to happen. Trevor stepped up first. I served on this board under Meredith. I was quiet. I let her dictate policy, and I regret it. He opened the folder and read from a list. Line item 17. B $6,450.00 paid to a private investigator to follow one of our residents. That PI confirmed they were instructed to track the residents' routines, who visited, and whether they were breaking HOA policies. He paused. None of that was legal, and none of it was authorized. He sat down. Mrs. Langston turned to me. Mr. Blackwell, would you like to address the board? I stood. The room went still. My father died in this house, I began. Right before he passed, he mailed me a letter I didn't even know existed. Inside was a hand-drawn map of our property, a warning and a simple reminder, protect what matters. I unfolded the worn paper, held it up. This map, and everything it represents, was the first thing Meredith tried to erase. When that failed, she came for me, with fines, cameras, and lies. But it didn't stop there. I walked over to the projector and displayed the original deed, certified, notarized, untouched. This proves our fence was never under HOA jurisdiction. She knew it, lied about it, and punished me anyway. I turned back to the crowd. This was never about a Rolls-Royce. It was about someone using power like a weapon, and the people who either helped or looked away. Eyes turned to the back, where Meredith now stood. She'd slipped in quietly, arms crossed, sunglasses perched in her hair like she still owned the room. I locked eyes with her. She didn't flinch. But when Mrs. Langston cleared her throat and read aloud the recommendation, permanent removal from all HOA duties, public apology, and a request for city prosecution, her jaw tightened. She tried to speak. No, the chairwoman said calmly. You've already said too much. Danielle handed me Ray's letter. I unfolded it again. I wrote, some people try to control the land. Others learn from it. I know which side I'm on. Mrs. Langston nodded. This board officially accepts all recommendations. The motion is carried. People stood, not out of protest but solidarity, a quiet wave of heads nodding, hands clapping, no fireworks, just closure. Outside the gym, I walked past Meredith's Lexus. She was sitting inside again. She didn't roll the window down, but she didn't look away either. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Danielle followed a few steps behind, looking around the neighborhood like she was seeing it for the first time. You think it's over? She asked. I looked back at the gym, at the trees bending in the late wind, at the cracked bench by the corner lot. The same one where my dad used to sit and sip his thermos on early Sunday mornings. It is for me, I said. But now this place gets to decide what kind of community it wants to be. She nodded, quietly. And for the first time since this all began, The silence felt earned. Some people try to control the land, others learn from it. Justice in the end wasn't loud, it was steady, rooted. Like the oak out front Dad planted when I was 12. Thanks for walking this with me. Have you ever had to fight back against an overreaching HOA or seen power abused in your own neighborhood? Drop your city in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Let's remind them, this kind of story, it's not rare, it's just finally being told.